invitaría a Manuel Menéndez, presidente de EDP, a que inaugurara el seminario.
Muchas gracias. Vamos a hacerlo en inglés, pero va a ser en inglés el seminario. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this seminar organized by Funseam. On behalf of the group EDP, I welcome you to our office here in Madrid. I would like to thank Funseam for organizing this event, and they also take this opportunity to congratulate the Funseam Chairs team and the Chair of Energy Sustainability, elected by Maite Costa, for the extraordinary work that they do, promoting research, analysis and debate in the field of energy economics, environmental sustainability, and the transition to a low carbon fleet. Today, we are privileged to have with us Professor Andreas Löschel, a distinguished expert in energy economics and sustainability. In addition to his extensive academic and research career as professor of environmental and resource economics and sustainability at the Ruhr University Bochum, Andreas Löschel is a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the 5th and 6th Assessment Report. From 2011, he has been the chairman of the expert commission of the German government to monitor the energy transformation, and since 2024, chairman of the board of directors of the Energy Systems of the Future, a public-private initiative with key players at Europe level. Furthermore, Professor Löschel has a strong research record in the fields of economics, energy, and climate change, with numerous publications in leading academic journals. This seminar comes at a crucial time for Europe. There is now a consensus on the need to progressively reduce carbon emissions and reach global net zero by 2050. And the European Union has the will to lead this transition. The size of the ambition is large. To reach the new target of the revised Renewable Energy Directive of the EU needs to almost double the current share of renewables by 2030, from 23% in 2022 to 42.5% in 2030. In the electricity sector, this means generating around 70% of electricity from renewable sources. In 2023, for example, being a record year, we generated 44% of electricity from renewables. So still many challenges lie ahead. We know that the economic and geopolitical situation introduces volatility in the market and uncertainty for investors, but the goals will not be achieved without further measures in a wide range of areas, such as grid development, regulation, or incentives for further electrification. In today's seminar, we will address this key topic, and we hope you find it interesting and useful. So, Professor Andreas Löschel, thank you very much for being here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manuel. Just solo unas breves palabras. I will start in Spanish and I will continue in English. Thank you, Manuel, for your words and to have the opportunity to be in your headquarters in Madrid to have these seminars. Bienvenidos a todos. La verdad es que los que conocéis Funseam, esto venía siendo muy habitual antes de la pandemia, el tema de, más allá de los formatos abiertos, con mayor participación de público, realizábamos seminarios a puerta cerrada, en un formato muy reducido, con expertos destacados para abordar cuestiones de relevancia para el sector energético, haciendo frente o dando respuesta a los retos climáticos, a los retos energéticos. Y creíamos que era muy oportuno el tema de recuperar esos seminarios. Por lo tanto, pues agradecerte, Manuel, el hecho de que podamos estar aquí en vuestra casa. Veo aquí a los miembros de la comisión ejecutiva, Alicia, Jorge, muchísimas gracias, al resto del equipo de EDP, EDPR, que lo ha hecho posible. Y nada, voy a ser muy breve. I will continue in English. For us, it's a pleasure to discuss about the future of the European climate and energy policy in Europe in a very crucial moment. The European elections have highlighted strong trends on a continental scale, and as a result, the European Union is now entering in an intense political debate, which will allow priorities for the next 5 to be defined, particularly regarding the continued implementation of the Green Deal initiated back in 2019. The definition of a new industrial policies will be a major challenge for the next legislature to confront the interventionist policies of the United States and China, and particularly in terms of green industrialization and to ensure the continent's strategic autonomy. We were talking about the climate challenges that we are facing. And obviously in this moment we have to define the new priorities, and new priorities in an intense debate, political debate, without forgetting the lessons learned from the 2022 energy crisis. That it's extremely relevant to be conscious about the effects of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that disrupted the European energy markets, and consequently energy costs rose steeply. So it's extremely relevant to be able to conciliate the objectives of decarbonization, competitiveness, and security of supply. Turbulent political times. In this year, we have an unprecedented number of elections across the world, especially the elections in the United States, and where the European Union needs a strong leadership in a more crucial and relevant moment. I'm not going to present Andreas. Manuel presented perfectly. Thank you, Andreas, for being with us. For us, it's a pleasure to have your participation in this seminar, to have your participation as a visiting professor in the University in Barcelona in the chair of energy sustainability. And for us, it's extremely relevant to have the opportunity to discuss and debate with you about the most relevant issues, the most relevant energy and climate issues for this decade. Thank you, Andreas, and the floor is yours.
Bueno, muchas gracias a Manuel, muchas gracias a Joan por invitarme hoy a presentar en el seminario, y muchas gracias a Maite, ¿no? Por aceptarme como profesor visitante en la Universidad de Barcelona. So, thanks a lot for having me. And we had discussed a bit what to present today, you know, and as you heard, I'm of course very much involved into let's say the decision or the policy making on energy in Germany for a long time, but also we try, you know, to understand a bit what happens on the European level. And for the last election, we came up with a paper on the challenges for the Commission, and we did the same again this year. And I wanted to talk a bit about this paper, but also I'm going to enrich it a bit with some German perspectives. No, the group that wrote this paper is a group of academics, from different member states in Europe. Frédéric Gonan from France, Pedro Linares, your own here in Madrid, David Newberry from Cambridge, Karin Pittel and Julio Saavedra from the IFO in Munich, and Georg Zachmann from Bruegel in Brussels. And then we put together some thoughts about what was the energy crisis, what we might have learned, and what's probably going to be there, as an insight for the way forward. And as I said, I'm going to discuss a few of the things that we wrote up in this piece, but I'm also going to enrich it a bit, with some German perspective, as I said. And now I'm going to use this one because I saw that you have this fancy thing, and I thought I should do that. Later on, I'm going to enlarge it but I should not overdo it probably. Okay, so lessons learned. I think one of the things, of course, that we've seen is that, this energy crisis was profound. Not only in Spain or in Germany. It hit all European member states. And still, the responses of the national governments have been very different, to these challenges. And if you remember, there was a German Commission president, Ursula von der Leyen, who said, well, the energy markets are not fit for purpose. No? We are not capable of dealing with these things. And at that time, and still, I was not fully convinced about this. But anyways, it stirred, of course, a lot of discussions on how we are dealing with it. Whether we use, let's say, the markets to help us, or whether we intervene in the market, and how can we actually sustain in these times of crisis. And if you look at what has been done on the member state levels in the European Union, you can see that there was actually a bright variety of national measures to ameliorate in one way or the other the impact of the crisis. So some of these measures were useful, I would claim, others probably not. And I go with a German example. For example, we made gasoline cheaper as a response to the crisis, which seems to be not a very good idea from an economic point of view. If you are meeting a supply crunch, making demand cheaper. So there are some measures that worked well, others probably not. Some of these measures, they are going to stay. And we learned from your introductory comments, of course, that especially in the area of renewables, there have been also some big changes, and probably to the worse. Could be. We can discuss that later. And others, probably they are going to disappear again, and probably we are happy that they are disappearing. A lot of the measures, I think you're going to be distributed the slides later on, if you want to see in more detail, or it's also in the paper. A lot of these measures were actually on affordability. So how can we actually afford what we are seeing as price hikes, not only in gas, but also, of course, in electricity and the related markets. And still, there are some measures that were targeted to the security of supply issues. Sector-wise, interestingly, a lot was actually targeted to the electricity sector because of knock-on effects of high gas prices on electricity prices in the electricity markets. And of course, in Germany, again, a big discussion about how we actually deal with, for example, the phase-out of nuclear in the times of crisis, because we have seen these very high electricity costs associated with these skyrocketing gas prices in Europe, affecting the electricity market, but not primarily, as a secondary effect, let's say, of these impacts. But there are also, impacts that try to look on gas or only on gas in security of supply, as already said. And most of the measures were actually short-term measures. Okay, some were long-term measures, and I'm going to talk about some of them. For example, about new infrastructures that we built. In Germany, most prominently, these were LNG terminals that were built in record time in Germany, and our chancellor tried to convince us that this is the new German speed, because usually these things take a long time. In Germany, usually, if you want to build a wind turbine, might take you 7 years or so. At least now they try to make it quicker, but still it takes a long time. The LNG terminals were built, many of them, in less than a year. Of course, they were floating LNGs, but still you need a lot of course, arrangements. Plus, they also built some permanent ones that are already in operation or have been in operation last year. Okay, so many short-term. Okay, some long-term, a lot of income support, which is actually a good thing because from an economic perspective, that's what I just said about the gasoline. You don't want to make gas, oil, electricity cheap, but you want to help people to deal with the consequences of these high prices, and the prices are high because supply is expensive and you want to bring down demand. So it's good if you provide income support, especially for low-income households, instead of purchasing support, on energy, and indeed many of the measures, try to come up with this type of income support. Still, we also learned that we have very little knowledge about energy demand in general. Okay, so it was very difficult to identify exactly who is behind your electricity meter or your gas meter. So in Germany, again, when we designed this income support, in the end, we didn't know whether this is a family with 4 kids, low income, or somebody that has a huge house, and a swimming pool or whatever. So we could not differentiate. In the end, so this income support was then given basically for everybody in the same way, because you could not differentiate. And so we learned also that it's really important to open up channels for more specific interventions, and you need more data in the energy sector. Actually, we wrote also a letter to Nature, I think last year, asking for more data on energy issues, because I think there is a lot of data, but let's say on the regulatory side, we are kind of understaffed to do really good decision making. And as I said, more than 400 measures, with very different characteristics, as I said, mostly group specific, and mostly trying to reduce burdens on some of the actors. Now, and this was relatively successful if you measure success in terms of EU diversification away from Russian gas. Aside from some of the Eastern European countries and Austria, most countries have actually gone away from Russian gas, probably some via LNG, but no longer via pipelines. And so if you measure this in terms of the effectiveness of these policies, this worked relatively well. After some problems, I'm going to talk a bit about some of these problems and how we can probably cope with it, but it worked relatively well. And that was as for the case for Germany. And in Germany, it's in a way a special situation, and the special situation is there because we have 2 specific characteristics. The first characteristic, the German energy policy in the 2000s and 2010s concentrated a lot towards cheap gas from Russia, via pipelines. That was Nord Stream 1. But as well, this was Nord Stream 2, that was in preparation until the war began, and that led to a situation where, especially in the last 1 or 2 decades, the share of gas that we got from Russia increased substantially. And in 2022, we had 55% of gas from Russia. So 55% of gas from Russia. We had also 60% of coal from Russia, and I think 60% of oil from Russia. Oil and coal is not so much a problem because these are international markets. So it takes a bit of time, but you can of course rearrange your sources. But gas is a different problem. That's problem number 2, because in Germany we were relying on pipeline gas, and we didn't have any LNG facilities in Germany. And that was, I would say, a huge problem, let's say a misunderstanding in a way of the role LNG could play in terms of energy security. And of course, if you only go for the cheapest gas, then it's clear that the answer is you import gas from Russia, but then of course you are open to a lot of danger, risks, concerning the resilience of your energy systems. And so in Germany, we were in this situation, and at that time, 1 week after after the invasion into the Ukraine, I wrote a paper together with co-authors, which we called "What if the economic effects of for Germany of a stop of energy imports from Russia?" And this was probably the most influential paper I've written because it was the first one that was actually published on this crisis and was discussed in the New York Times, and our chancellor talked about it on Prime TV, not very positively, I have to admit, honestly. But our claim was that, okay, this energy shock will be a major crisis, but if we handle it well, this is something that we can survive, no? So that was our point, and I have to say my contribution was relatively little because we were using a macroeconomic model, and the question that my colleagues were asking me was, what's the shock? What's the shock going to be? Okay, so what we looked at is, okay, what are the the energy imports to the EU and to Germany? Okay, what can we get from using our pipeline systems? Because we could get more pipeline gas from Norway, from the Netherlands, potentially also from the south. Okay, what can we get from LNG via Belgium and Netherlands, France? Okay, what can we get from our storages? That's a sad story because Russian companies bought large share of the German gas storages, and they have actually not filled it. No, in the winter before the invasion into the Ukraine. So no, we could not get anything out of the storages because they were empty, more or less. And what's left? Okay, and then the rough calculation was 30% is missing. Okay, so we have to adjust now because we even if we are using all other supply options, now we still will have a shock of 30%. And the question was, how can we bring down the gas demand in Germany? And the general idea is, we have to let markets work. To bring down the demand, and we have to invest in appropriate infrastructure. Okay, and addressing the two problems that I just talked about, no, only going for the cheapest gas and have no real infrastructure in place. And so, probably first to the gas supply. We build up large capacities of LNG terminals in Germany. As said, floating, but as well land-based LNG import terminals in the North Sea and in the Baltic Sea because of the specificities of the German gas grid. Where the eastern part of Germany, this was actually Lubmin. I was there in an Institute for Advanced Studies in Greifswald, that is about 15 kilometers away from Lubmin. So I was on spot, so to say. So here is Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and you have to substitute that now. So therefore you need LNG terminals in the east, in the Baltic Sea, and you need it also in the North Sea. And so, and then this started relatively quickly, and you can see that already now that there is a substantial contribution of these LNG terminals to Germany, and still people are complaining because this capacity is not fully used, and I'm arguing that this is a security against other types of possible interruptions that could happen, and we are not sure that this is not happening, and so therefore we need now some resilience in the system. Okay, but still there's a lot of debate whether this is overbuilding infrastructure. I would say no, given also the scale of the costs now that are associated. Okay, and the other point was bring down demand. And as I said, a lot of this debate, of course, on how we respond to the crisis was to what extent should we let markets work. Okay, and how should we actually cope with high prices in gas, electricity markets? In Germany, the government tried relatively early on to let the markets work. Okay, we have a complicated governmental situation with Greens, Social Democrats and Liberals, where it's not really clear how they stand on markets, no, but in this case all the economists actually try to convince them that in order to bring down this demand, it's important to communicate high prices of gas, no? Actually, I, as I said, not only for today, but also for the future, no? Because of course we know with the gas boom that is coming now, the prices have gone already down substantially, but in order to make these changes, it's important, no, to understand this is going to be costly. And then of course people said, well, you know, this is not going to be very effective. No, because we had for our paper, no, we had estimations where people told us, you know, it's not possible to reduce gas demand by more than 8% in Germany. Okay, and we said, well, yeah, technically that might be the case, no, but in reality, we think the potentials are much higher. Some of these potentials are not very pleasant because it relates to value chain disruptions and shifting of some of the energy-intensive primary products away from Germany for some time, like we have seen in ammonia, for example, where we stopped producing ammonia in Germany, we produced it in the US, we imported it, and that means we have been importing gas implicitly from the US via these ammonia routes, but it helped to reduce the demand for industry and then households by almost 30%. Okay, so this gap I showed you was almost closed in very little time. So we did much better than we expected. You know, when we started this, the claim was, you know, we have to close down hospitals. We are going to guess in mass poverty in Germany and so forth. It all turned out to be not the case. And I would claim part of the story was well-functioning of markets, not only this part of the market, but also the electricity market. Now that helped us a lot. Without the European electricity market, would be also very difficult to cope with this situation. So this was gas. And of course, the same is true for EU electricity generation, where we have the same type of problems, how to cope with the demand. Now that's a European perspective on electricity, where there are some negative impacts, as you know. Nuclear, that was the discussion. I said not only about Germany, but also about the French nuclear reactors at the time. Hydropower was really a problem in this period. And then we have seen that some other options have been used more heavily. In Germany, we had a lot of discussion about lignite and hard coal. Because, you know, in Germany we decided to phase out coal, but for this crisis we brought back some of the coal plants that were actually already in reserves. I should say that I was not for putting them in the reserves to start with, but now they were coming back because of the high prices. But interestingly, they didn't come back very much. So actually the use of coal was surprisingly low in Germany, but we brought them back, which I think was a good sign. And then you have more wind, more solar, and again, a lot of demand reduction. So that's the biggest contributor again. And demand reduction again coming from these price shocks that people have experienced. As I said, in Germany we try to cope with both things in a way that restores mostly the market signal. So in the German case, what we did is everybody gets 80% of his last year's consumption, times the price he's paying versus a reference price, in order to let's say provide a lump sum payment to households based on last year's consumption levels. Okay, so the idea is, of course, that this should not actually impact your demand in the current situation, because the payment is independent of what you are doing. It's always best to save if you have possibilities to save, and this was the way how we dealt with it, and we gave a lot of money because 80% of last year's consumption gas price minus 12 cents. That was seen as the new normal for gas prices. Okay, that provided quite a lot of money to individuals. No? And as I said, across the board, so I also get a large payment. Everybody gets a large payment, no? Which just showed that this is, of course, overly expensive, but still helped to bring down these demands. Okay, so we've seen some lessons learned from the crisis. I already indicate energy security, which was practically not a discussion, emerged as a new important point, thinking a bit about this trade-off between cheapest energy available or affordable energy available and energy security. So not only it's about climate change, no, it's not only about affordable energy, it's also about secure energy. And therefore, we had a new debate, unthinkable that we would have been building LNG terminals, no, before the crisis. We did that, and a lot of these type of things happened. We try best to avoid distortionary policies, so direct interventions. As I said, sometimes they have been used, but of course that depends on, let's say, local circumstances, whether this is that's even a possibility. So in our case, I described our situation with no LNG terminals. No, if we don't bring down gas demand, it's clear that we would have to cut consumers. And given that we have no information, as I said, about the consumers, then the regulatory authorities would have a dramatic task to do in order to bring down, to intervene in gas demand. Okay, then I already talked about adjusting existing and build new infrastructure, which as well emerged as a topic. It also emerged as a topic, what's the future of gas? Because gas was seen, not only in Germany, but also in Germany, as a bridge that should support renewables, okay? And also around the world, of course, you have seen that many countries moved away from coal, moved into gas because of lower climate impacts, but also because it suits better now to renewable build-outs. So there was a large discussion also, can we sustain previous gas consumption? And I think the general perspective on that is no. So we have to reduce gas consumption potentially to lower levels than we initially thought, but gas will still be there. No, I think in the break we talked a bit about heat sector in Germany. So gas is to a large extent used for heating in Germany. No, and changing these sectors is very, very difficult. So it will stay there for a longer time, but the overall level will decrease for sure. And that means also you have to think about how to repurpose your gas grids, what are possibilities for moving into hydrogen, green hydrogen in the future. And this discussion also, of course, accelerated during the crisis. We also wrote that we need something like a strategic foresight office that is, let's say, exactly thinking a bit ahead about these crisis situations. That is potentially not only energy, but that could also be, for example, raw material problems that we might face and shortages. I think I have some slides later on. Also cyber attacks and so forth. So we need, let's say, we need better data, but we need also more capacity to think ahead and to prepare for situations that are not in the general playbooks of policy makers. So, so then I think we also had, we gained some experiences on coordination. And I think I already said one thing that turned out to be very helpful was European electricity markets, helping us to cope with these crisis situation, and that of course is important. And if you look at the market design debates on the European level, there's a lot of efforts, of course, into how can we actually improve or promote long-term contracts on the European level. That's also something that has been picked up, of course, in the market design discussion in Europe, but also in the member states. In Germany, we are also struggling with new investments that we need, again, to complement our renewable build-out. If we don't want to use coal plants, we need something else, so we need new investments in gas plants, basically, that might be operated with hydrogen if we have this hydrogen from Spain, hopefully, or from other places in the future. This is something that we have to think about. We also saw this regulation on the European level on supporting renewables. So the move towards contracts for difference. And there, I think, of course, a contract for difference, let's say, depending a bit on how it is administered, is something that might be distortionary also on the market, because it always has a tendency of produce and forget. And then, of course, you can try to modify it such that it works better in market environment, but many economists are at least not fully convinced that this is what would happen. So the question is, if we have something like that, how can we implement that without, let's say, distorting the markets too much, and with providing some valuable, let's say, safeguard of renewable investments, given the turmoil that we are seeing on the market. So what we wrote is not mandatory, not distortionary, not unfair, not only public. And that means that, of course, you need a certain framework of renewable support that is not all coming from contracts for different and state support, but allows also for purchase power agreements, and other possibilities, that evolve over market mechanisms to support renewables in the long run. When we were talking about some things that stayed and were not so helpful, these were, for example, the clawback clauses the European Union implemented very early for renewables. I was actually fighting against that because I thought that's stupid. I mean, if you have a technology that's providing electricity at low costs, and now we have this explosion of the market, why shouldn't they make profits? Because that is the upside that you should give them. And in the end, of course, this was implemented. It didn't raise a lot of money, honestly. Actually, it raised practically no money. I think 150 million in Germany or so very little money, okay? But of course, it was a major intervention into the markets, which means, okay, now you would say, okay, at this prices, it's probably, you can understand it, but who guarantees that the next commission or the next council or whatever is not setting these levels at a lower level? You have just generate a new instrument, which is cutting prices. And that is also a problem when I talked about the investments in new power plants. Of course, there the same thing happens. We have seen that once the prices exploded, governments started to cap prices, which means if for any technologies, if you want to make an investment, you know that once you really are able to make some money out of your investment, you will potentially have the government intervene. And how should you convince somebody thinking about investment in gas power plants if he knows that we have this huge overbuild of renewables, and he's going to enter the market probably in 150 hours per year, okay, and that has to then come with really very high prices. If it's clear the policy is not going to allow that for one reason or the other, then of course, you're not going to invest. And that's this one thing, which is, I think, the the negative side effect of this discussion is about contracts for difference, including also, as we will see, that it of course shifts a bit the balance towards a more subsidy-based, governmental-based rollout, where we actually are convinced that the integration of renewables into the market is actually the big thing, and we have to not cannibalize these opportunities by providing an easy way out in terms of these contracts for difference. Okay. And as I said, we have seen several governments that refrain from interfering in the markets directly. That might also, of course, depend a bit on your budgetary situation. So let's say the response measures in Germany were really expensive. And if Germany wouldn't have been in a very solid financial situation, it would have been unthinkable to just come up with 200 billion of extra funds that you are distributing in the times of crisis. Okay, if this is not the possibility for you, then of course you directly target markets, because that is cheaper in a way, and so therefore I would also argue that it depends a bit on the budgetary situation, and this is of course worsening in all the member states. Also in Germany we have big discussions now, which is in this respect a bad thing, because it also might mean for the future we will see also more interventions in order to address these type of problems if they would happen again. Okay, we have also seen some good things in cooperation, joint auctions, for example, concerted reliability option pricing, common designs for promotion. I think this is still underexplored, and this was something out of the crisis, but I think we have not really, let's say, make this a permanent perspective. I think that's bad, because we have, of course, very unequal opportunities, for example, for building out renewables in Europe. In Germany, we have demand, electricity demand at the moment, peak demand, 80 gigawatt, and our target for 2035 is 450 gigawatt of renewable capacity. Okay. So that's immense, okay, and of course that means we are not fully, let's say, exploiting possibilities of using electricity or hydrogen or syn fuels from other places in Europe. We try to do it ourselves in a way, okay, and that generates, of course, a lot of problems also for the electricity market, because we are overbuilding our systems massively, and so the question, how can we distribute this a bit better in Europe, I think it will be an important question, because it all comes with a price tag, of course. It's just simply much more expensive to develop this in Germany, and not develop it in other places in Europe. And if we want to achieve full decarbonization, 100% renewables or whatever, we will have to exploit all European possibilities, because otherwise it just will become very, very expensive. Okay, and so we have seen some positive movement, but also I think it's still it has not really stuck with policymakers, that this is the way forward. Now, in terms of resilience, we've also seen some things that worked out well. So we had relatively little border closures, where they stopped actually trading between member states. There were some, but relatively little. We have seen some energy price subsidies, but overall not too much. This is a bit related to what I just said. The demand reduction pledge is the most important one. We've seen that in principle, the emissions trading system is kept intact, which is also promising. I have to say that in Germany we have not only the ETS, which is for energy-intensive industry and electricity sector. We also now have a second ETS, so a bit foreshadowing what's happening in Europe. 2027, and in the second ETS in Germany, that has a different setup. It has a price escalation. The price escalation has been stopped. in the crisis. No, it has been postponed, which I thought also is not a good signal in a way, because it brings this just to a policy level, no, where these prices are then decided much more by policies. But overall, they have not touched the ETS. In general, they use some of the receipts, of course, now to finance larger parts of Fit for 55 and so forth, and that has negative impacts on the prices indirectly, okay, but not directly targeted. So this went actually well, I would say. What went okay we have some new fora coordination platforms that helped us, for example, coordination of energy ministers, but still, I would say, a lot of possibilities to improve. Let's say coordination. One other example now in Germany, we are talking about implementation of capacity markets. Of course, it's much better to coordinate your capacity markets, and if all these different countries are surrounding Germany have their own capacity markets, so that's inefficient again. This type of coordination is actually not happening. But in principle, it would be good, if you would have more of this. We also saw some things went really wrong. I talked about the lack of preparedness. So we have been doing all types of scenario analysis, but none, that was capturing these type of disruption that we have seen. Nobody was prepared for that. So, as I said, on the day of invasion, we called our 8 friends and said, okay, now is the time where we have to put our machinery into movement, and we prepared this paper. And the success was that this was the first paper out that tried with, let's say, a sophisticated economic model. As I said, the chancellor said, oh, this is just a group of economists that are just putting together some models which in the end never work out. But in the end, we thought it's actually helpful, and we were not prepared for that. So therefore, it was really a lack of preparedness for these type of analysis individually, but also as a group, because we have seen that it's important, that you not only look at yourself, but you understand also what's happening in your surrounding member states, especially in a country like Germany, who is to a large extent transitionary country for many other countries surrounding it, that also depend on Russian gas and energy imports. So that's a problem. We also see that politically, there were not everybody was aligned, let's say, to this idea of increasing sensitivity. I talked about Germany defending its nuclear phase-out. So in the biggest times of crisis, we just stopped operating of 3 power plants. Difficult signal, I would say, to the rest of Europe. The Groningen gas fields, or in general, these policies that were actually increasing demand instead of reducing it, that we have observed in some countries in Europe. I also said the lack of data was also one of these insights, I think, because we were missing this granular data on prices, on contracts, on flows, and that was, of course, that's not only a problem in itself, but it also limits the possibilities of academics, or your companies are all doing this type of analysis of building, modeling that used this type of situation. And so therefore, I think these are the things we should really work on. But also, I think these are more these coordination things we really have to improve, and we should not forget, let's say, some of the positive impacts of this crisis. So we need to be prepared for these disruptions. So we have to acknowledge that, in increasing your resilience, you need to have some excess capacity, or you need to have some diversification, which might come at some cost. That is simply, that's an externality. Energy security is an externality. Everybody is looking for cheapest sources, And then as a society, you say, well, that's probably not optimal. It's an externality. You know? So the individual company, the individual consumer is not thinking about resilience. Okay, so it's an externality. And avoiding the externality, okay, comes with an additional cost, but this is not really a cost. No, this is just the visibility of a cost that's already in the system, like with climate change. Climate change, everybody understands. Energy security is the same. Okay, so we have to take this into account. So therefore, I'm always getting angry if they say, you know, the LNG terminals are only half used. Okay, yeah, if they are full used, that's stupid, no? But it's in normal situations. Okay, it's just a possibility to cope with problems. And of course, we have to keep that in mind when we are now developing new markets. So for example, I'm now working a lot on hydrogen, global hydrogen markets. So there it's exactly the same, no? I mean, we are now, we start at zero, global hydrogen market at zero, okay? And then of course, our moves are shaping the future because there are large path dependencies, in these markets. So if we are now, investing only in the markets that have the best opportunities today, the lowest cost today, then we are going to create path dependencies, and then we are going to limit our options for the future. Okay, so we have to be very careful now to also, for example, go into markets that are underdeveloped at the moment. And might not have these possibilities, but might be important as future providers of hydrogen. Okay, and so therefore we need a strategy, also an import strategy as Europe, that is not only looking at the places that deliver lowest cost hydrogen at the moment. Okay, and that's difficult to communicate, but that is something I think comes directly out of the crisis. And we have here, let's say, tabula rasa, so we can develop these markets, okay? And so we have to be very careful also in terms of policy making, not doing the same problems. I said foresight is much more important to understand systemic risk, to understand all the options that we have, thinking also outside the box, putting a bit more also trust into the elasticity of the system, because systems can be very elastic. I mean, if you know that one LNG tanker moving to Europe is generating you 3-digit millions of gains, I mean, you might consider that this is something you want to do, no? And so we should remember these insights, and of course we have to look a bit in front, no? Not only adjust in the crisis, but do some of these adjustments beforehand in order to be really prepared. Now, I already talked too long. I think I just want to end with one comment. And in the paper, we made the comment on the UK energy system reforms, because David Newbury from Cambridge was in our group, so he explained to us what's happening in the UK. But I want to stop with the German equivalent, because we have there also a bigger discussion about how we are designing climate neutral electricity markets. And we have touched already many aspects of that, of course, but there is let's say a regular process. I'm chairing the Energy Monitoring Commission of the German government, so we prepared a white paper for the government on these different topics where we think we have to adjust our markets. And I just to stop presentation and start discussion, I just want to go once again through these different areas where we are seeing the necessity for adjustment. And what we did in the white paper, we started from the current model, and we discussed a bit reform options in this area, okay? And I start with the coordination wholesale market. That was my quote from the very beginning. The uniform merit order model is, unfit. as we have learned. And then we had all these debates on market segmentation in one way or the other, Spanish model, Greek model, so ideas on how to do this differently. I would say this debate has very much calmed down after the experiences that we have seen, and we in all this debate we have not really seen the uniform merit order model not being attacked anymore that heavily, as we have seen it 2 years ago. I think that's good. Nevertheless, I think there are some challenges also for market developments. If you, for example, think about the coordination of flexible supplies, we have, of course, system markets, but they are not really taking into account the specificities of the different technologies, and they are going to be developed further. We also talked already a bit about financing of investments, which is a huge part of it. It plays a big role for renewables. It also plays a big role for dispatchable power plants, of course. For the renewables, I think that this is probably even not so tricky in a way. So, for example, in Germany, we have a system of a market premium model. That's something like a unilateral contract for difference. So you have a security against low electricity prices in Germany. And that is, in fact, working relatively well. And of course allows you also to integrate support systems or to get rid of support systems if electricity prices stay high, because then they are not going to ask for support because they are actually facing or perspectives of high electricity prices. We actually propose to stick to this model, or if you think you need something on the high prices, then thinking about something like bandwidth models, with low and higher prices, and the high prices so high that they only kick in if you have really crisis situations, so not on a regular basis. I think that might be a compromise, or you think about these financial CFDs, that would disentangle the payment again from the production and would keep then the incentives for the renewables, and of course for all the flexibility that's associated with it, the batteries and so forth, responding to the market signal. It's a bit more tricky for the dispatchable power plants. Because let's say the idea in Germany was that dispatchable power plants are refinanced out of the market. Okay, and let's say in textbook, I have a textbook on energy economics. In textbook, that's fine, That's what you would see, okay? But of course, outside textbook, it's getting a bit complicated, and especially if policy interventions are there, as I just described, then of course this is a problem. And this is, let's say, reiterated if you think about this public discussion where people said, okay, we need, I don't know, in Germany, 10 or 20 gigawatt of gas power plants. Otherwise, we are running into big problems, and government has to step in. Then, of course, I mean, you have a huge problem, of course, because who's going to invest if you see already, the subsidies in front of you? Then you will just wait, until the government is moving first, because for them pressure is a bit higher than for you. And so, therefore, in Germany, there have been for years practically no big investments in dispatchable power plants because of these two things, the visibility of market, or the reality of market interventions, and the discussion about the necessity of the government to step in at some point in time. And now, of course, you're in a self-fulfilling prophecy, so you have to do something because that's not going to be cured out of the market. And so, therefore, I also have changed my view on the electricity-only market, and we moved into this dimension here. And now we are discussing capacity market implementation in Germany. We are going to see, hopefully, or probably in the next weeks or so an agreement with the Commission on a new power plant law on auction of 10 gigawatt of gas-based power plants. And the government has also pledged to move into a capacity market in 2028. Okay, we'll see what that will mean. Of course, we have some ideas as economists what it should mean. Include as many options as possible, not only focus on the gas plants, but also include other flexibilities in the markets and try to be broad. We also think that it might be a good idea to have a more decentralized way of coming up with necessary capacities and not let politicians only decide what is needed, because then you have a strong tendency to oversupply, gigawatts. They like counting gigawatts, and so there are some discussions about that, but we'll see how this is going to work out. Now, the last point I wanted to mention, 2 points I want to mention. The last one is the electricity cost, but then I also want to say a few words about localized market signals, because that's also a really big thing. I'm now in Barcelona, so I only follow from the distance. But Sweden, for example, has refused to build a 2.5 gigawatt electricity line to Germany because they say the market is too inefficient and too difficult to predict. And what was behind that, if you read what they said, is we have this system in Germany where we have one market zone, one price zone in Germany, and we have the problems that the demand and supply of electricity is falling apart more and more over time, with a lot of renewables in the north and high demand in the south. Okay, and this problem is a locational problem. It's also a temporal problem, of course, between demand and supply. So, of course, we need a huge grid development to cope with it, but it's relatively clear that this is not going to help. And then you would need to have some price signals that show that in the north, electricity is abundant at some hours of the year, okay, which would then initiate additional demand in the north or reduce supply in the north, and vice versa in the south, putting away some of the pressure, and that is not happening so far. So the idea of how we cope with this problem of a uniform bidding zone is very visible in Germany, and there are some. Are we recording this actually? Okay, yeah. Because okay. So policy-wise, okay, this here is not possible. Bidding zone division, politically very difficult, because then prices are, of course, differentiated between regions, and that is putting the south on additional costs of energy and the north in an advantage. Problem is, political economy says the south is more powerful than the north, so this is not implementable. Actually, I was making some proposals on how to rebalance this, because I mean these are two things. The one thing is incentives for demand and supply of electricity. The other thing is who should carry the burden now of the system costs, and these are two things, and you can think of ways to cope with the fairness issue after the right signals have been in place. But it's difficult. So we are discussing this bidding zone division and also some changes in network charges, because that's another possibility to cope with these problems. And the last thing I would like to say is how we deal with the cost increases. And that's also a tedious issue, because in Germany we have actually used up, let's say, most of the possibilities for policymakers to intervene in this cost component. The costs of renewables are big, In Germany we pay a lot, in 2021, this was 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Because that was distributed to the energy consumers. Okay, now they have changed it. Now this is paid out of the governmental budget. which brings down cost. And we have the same interventions for energy-intensive companies in Germany, if you think about grid charges, electricity taxes, and so forth. So we have this system of historically developed selective interventions to foster energy-intensive industry in Germany, with these type of special rules. The problem is that, let's say, we ran out of options there a bit, because besides the wholesale electricity price, there is not so much more that is coming on top. If you think 5 years back, wholesale electricity price would constitute probably 1/4 of your electricity bill. And that has changed in recent years, or recently. That means we have here a problem. So energy companies are complaining about high costs, but we have not many opportunities or possibilities to reduce these costs. And the costs are going to stay high, because this renewable electricity system will be expensive. The grid development is expected to cost something between 250 and 400 billion euro over the course of the next 2 decades. That has to be distributed somehow. So even if the build out of the renewables is probably not so much putting pressure on the bills for the future, because I would say this comes at moderate costs to some extent, but the infrastructure build out, this will be really expensive, and that has to be carried by consumers, and this will put us into a problematic situation, and we cannot really cope with it. So therefore, I mean, we also don't have a lot to offer. We made some proposals for restructuring of levies and charges. This is the part that is left over, let's say. But we also made some proposals on how you allow households and companies to directly tap into cheap electricity from renewables. And this is, the question is, how can we actually develop further power purchase agreements with installations close to the companies, for example, allowing them to make use, let's say, of more stable long-term electricity that is provided to them, which at the moment is, of course, mainly failing because a lot of the companies in Germany are small, medium-sized companies, and they are not capable of carrying decadal risks in these bilateral contracts. So that's one issue we discussed a bit. And the other issue, which is, let's say, the pendant, the equivalence on the household side, is the question on how do you deal with your tenants. Because tenants have the same problem. They do not have access to these renewable energy options because if you're a tenant, it's practically impossible to get own produced electricity from e.g. rooftop solar, because the regulation is very, very strict and you don't get it. So therefore, we also made some suggestions for how to reduce the administrative burdens, the red tape on these tenant electricity system in order to provide new opportunities for renewable directly to households and also to companies. Okay, so many things ahead. I have a lot of slides left, but I think it's a good moment to stop. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Andreas. We finish with this message, important message, the relevance of the priorities when defining the climate and energy policies. I have no doubt that there will be a lot of additional questions, but it's question to finish on time. And I will ask Professor Maria Teresa Costa to finish the seminar with her final remarks. Thank you, Maite.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Andreas, for your presentation. Your paper, the policy report, What's Next? Securing Europe's Energy and Competitiveness, is an excellent document, as always. Andreas has accustomed us to, both in his conferences and in his research. As Andreas pointed out, the war in Ukraine has required new mechanisms to address Europe's energy, industrial, and technological weakness, and at the same time ensuring the achievement of the 2030 and 2050 objectives. Decarbonization is not a simple process and highly costly, as you say. It requires great challenges that affect the regulatory framework and economic policy program and measures. Today, we can no longer talk about simple energy policy or energy and climate policy. No, the change is disruptive and affects the entire economy and our behavioral model as consumers. Really, all the society is affected. I would like to underline several points as conclusions of Andreas Löschel's relevant lecture. Voy a destacar 3 puntos. Primero me voy a referir su start point, de primer punto, que se preguntaba dónde estábamos y a dónde vamos, ¿no? Quisiera destacar ahí que el cambio que se produce en el caso del gas en el mercado alemán, especialmente, pero en toda Europa, en España menos afectados por nuestra excelente infraestructura, no solamente ha puesto de manifiesto la posibilidad de un despliegue de medidas que han permitido no dejar de atender el suministro, sino también, con respecto a lo que comentaba hace un momento, respecto a la conducta, el cambio en el comportamiento de los consumidores. Cuando industrias y familias han disminuido, recuerdo que es, me parece un 30%, no sé qué porcentaje, pero muy elevado, del consumo de energía. Y esto no es ajeno a algo que no debemos olvidar, que nos ha ayudado a solventar bastantes cosas en estos últimos años, que es el sentido de pertenencia a un interés, a una colectividad con un interés común. Y no en vano, esto que ha ocurrido en Alemania no está lejos, ni mucho menos, sino que va de la mano de lo que queda incorporado en el Repower European Union respecto al papel de la solidaridad. La solidaridad ha sido un elemento fundamental para reorganizar o dar cobertura a la demanda de gas en Europa. España, que no tenemos necesidad de tener unos niveles de almacenamiento tan elevados, hemos tenido al 100% los almacenamientos, hemos tenido las plantas de GNL marítimas al límite de su capacidad para poder atender no nuestra demanda, sino la demanda de Europa. Y creo que esto es una buena fotografía de lo que es Europa. Y también vemos en la electricidad cómo ha habido también una importante reducción en base, no únicamente, debido a los comportamientos de los ciudadanos, de los consumidores. ¿Qué lecciones? Voy a entrar más en las lecciones que en los control, ¿no? ¿Qué lecciones? Pues una de las principales lecciones que yo creo que la Comisión se ha dado cuenta en las últimas cosas que ha puesto sobre la mesa y que se han aprobado hace un mes y medio en el Parlamento, nuevas fórmulas para garantizar el suministro. La idea de solidaridad no es un concepto ético y de comportamiento, no, es un instrumento de política energética y de política económica. La fuerte resiliencia de los consumidores también va de la mano de esa solidaridad. Y eso permite entrar en algo que ha señalado muy bien Andreas y que está en el core business del último paquete de la industria verde, fundamentalmente va dirigido a ello, a reducir la dependencia. Reducir la dependencia que no va solo de tema energético, que no te ha dado tiempo a presentarlo, pero de los materiales, uno de los materiales fundamentales, de los que Europa no tiene prácticamente nada. De una mayor flexibilidad, que aquí también tiene un papel muy importante en el sector eléctrico, cuando menos la demanda y el papel de la demanda en los mercados de balance, y de la eficiencia energética. Como tú señalas muy bien, de la eficiencia energética en la industria, en los edificios y el transporte, que ayuda no solamente a reducir emisiones de CO2, que es lo que más, digamos, el tema más concurrente cuando se habla de esto, sino también para reducir la demanda. Pero si hay uno de los temas que me parece más gigantesco en el sentido de la traducción del inglés de Mouth, ¿no? Muy importante, es el de la coordinación de las políticas, que insiste también en el paquete de industria verde de la Unión Europea. Un único camino y unos únicos mecanismos, la armonización. Todos los que nos dedicamos al tema, desde yo más años lo recuerdo, no porque me dedique más años al tema por vocación, sino por edad. Me acuerdo que siempre hemos estado hablando en las reuniones en Bruselas, aquí, tal, la armonización. Bien, pues la armonización es un objetivo deseado que ahora se ha convertido en algo que no podemos dejar de cumplir y de hacer que todos los países lo asuman. Y de hecho, en el paquete de industria verde pone compromisos mandatorios, incluso hasta los procedimientos administrativos. Los pasos dados, yo creo que los pasos dados vale la pena destacar tres cosas porque son muy vertebradoras y que me parecen enormemente importantes. Todo ello nos ha llevado a un acuerdo, por el momento hay un acuerdo y se ha plasmado en la reforma del mercado eléctrico. Ya el Consejo de Energía se puso de acuerdo en octubre del 23 y esto se ha aprobado ya en el Parlamento Europeo en abril también, creo. ¿Qué es lo que se pretende? Atender a los consumidores. ¿Qué es lo que más se pretende? Que las energías renovables puedan ser alcanzadas con crecientes inversiones y que estas inversiones tengan la seguridad del retorno. Es decir, dar seguridad a la inversión. ¿Cómo? Con mercados a plazo. Con mercados a plazo que no eliminan los mercados a corto, porque no ha eliminado el spot, pero el mercado a plazo, si funciona la economía, tendrá que tener cada vez más importancia, porque en principio todos los inversores tienen aversión al riesgo, en principio, por lo tanto irán al mercado a plazo. Y ahí tenemos instrumentos de enorme utilidad, con todas las limitaciones, por supuesto, son los contratos por diferencias. Me ha gustado mucho lo que ha señalado Andreas, porque a veces las noticias no han dado bien lo que es el contrato por diferencias. No son públicos necesariamente. Puede haber una solución de distribución de los costes del riesgo entre todos los afectados, todos los consumidores, es decir, en el mercado, pero no es necesariamente público, o también los Power Purchase Agreement. Esto beneficia al consumidor, refuerza la asequibilidad y da, como decía, a la seguridad a las inversiones en renovables, lo cual nos permite ir alcanzando los objetivos 30 y 50. Y por último, dos cuestiones. Algo que hasta ahora prácticamente no formaba parte de los documentos o de los discursos más allá de una frase. Y es el elemento para mí fundamental y el que queda más recorrido por hacer, que es el de las infraestructuras. Las infraestructuras, es necesario un despliegue enorme de infraestructuras y cuando no se tienen, que se lo pregunten a los alemanes en el gas, eso no, porque el problema es sus limitaciones de infraestructuras en gas. Por lo tanto, las infraestructuras, tanto en redes de transporte como en redes de distribución, porque tanto distribución como red de transporte es necesaria para las nuevas evacuaciones, es necesario también darles una solución de flexibilidad con una regulación in progress que hasta ahora nunca se ha contemplado y que es necesario porque los proyectos de inversión no duran tanto tiempo como los anteriores de tecnologías convencionales, como son los ciclos, y la entrada permanente de nuevas renovables no puede estar esperando o hacer ocurrir una cosa que ha ocurrido aquí en España. Como hay líneas de alta tensión que no podían, en las que no se podía evacuar unas producciones, o no se podrá en futuro, se podría evacuar en el futuro unos volúmenes de energía elevados, se ha permitido considerar 200 kilómetros de una línea de transporte como una línea privada. Y esto es una fotografía de lo que debe evitarse, haciendo que la red de planificación sea de soluciones desde el punto de vista de la regulación. Y en el caso de del gas es necesario resolver los problemas pendientes hasta el límite de años que se ha fijado para el gas, pero con una diferencia, pensando siempre a largo plazo. Esos tubos han de ser reconvertibles en transporte para hidrógeno. Y en eso a España y Alemania tienen proyectos conjuntos y un interés común. Y Francia deja su territorio por el mundo para cruzarlo. La dependencia. Bueno, la dependencia es no sé si lo vamos a conseguir, ha publicado cosas, digamos, de interés lector por el momento en la comisión y se han aprobado, pero no sé si va a ser posible alcanzar esos objetivos tan optimistas respecto a lo que vamos a ser capaces de obtener de esas materias primas fundamentales, porque creo que están en todo caso debajo de algunas grandes ciudades. Bien. Pero como mínimo hay un cierto planteamiento. Obviamente todo ello pues acompañado de otras cuestiones que ahora no viene al caso, pero que son importantes, como la financiación y la formación. In short, Europe must be prepared for profound, deep changes that will continually appear. The energy transition is idiosyncratically disruptive. We need to invest today, as you say, thinking in the future. Reflections such as those presented by Professor Löschel today help set the path forward. The German reform, I know very few things about the German reform. You explained perfectly well the way you are opening. The German reform options is a contribution that I think it's very interesting to debate. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much for your conference. And finally, it has been an honor to close this seminar and to be able to extend my gratitude to all the collaborations that Andreas has made as associate researcher of the chair of energy sustainability for many, many years. Until now, and I hope in the future.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure.